So you got your new printer, you got it set up, but what do you do now? Today we're going to go over section 1.6, finding STL files, and section 1.7, slicing software. Stay tuned. My name's Jim, and this is the Edge of Tech. All right, so you got everything ready to go. So let's start with section 1.6, finding STL files. But you might ask me, Jim, what the heck is an STL file? Well, as Luke explains it, this is a file designated for a method of taking a model and using a program to break it down into triangles that the slicing software can use to make the parts we want. So in layman's terms, this is a file we need to be able to print on our printer. Okay, so now we know we need the STL file, but where the heck do we get them? You can do a quick Google search and there's a bunch of sites. The first link on here will take you to a site that has a bunch of different websites on it. And Luke Hatfield prefers Thingiverse. And the third bullet point here is actually his Thingiverse page. All of this will be linked below. Okay, so we're going to walk through getting STL files now. So the first thing you want to do is go ahead and open your browser. I choose to use Google Chrome. And I'm going to use the link for One Bad Marine, which is Luke Hatfield's designs. And that takes us right to his page. So the first thing I'm going to show you how to get is the Creality hot end PTFE fix. So what you want to do is look through your designs. When you see something you like, go ahead and click on it. And Thingiverse is notoriously slow, so you might have to just wait for a few seconds there. Sometimes it takes forever. But one thing I want to show, up in the top, it'll show you who it's from, who created it, and then if you scroll down, you'll actually see a summary. I like to read these because a lot of times the author will show how he's done it or tell you the instructions he's used, that kind of thing, right in here. And if you scroll a little farther down, a lot of the good authors will put their print settings in here. So you'll see what kind of printer they printed it on, what resolution they used, what kind of infill they used. Sometimes they even put what filament they used, and then some notes. And I always read this. The reason I always read this is because I like to, if I'm printing a file, I like to be pretty close or spot on to what they got. And unless I'm changing it greatly, making it bigger or smaller, that kind of thing, I like to follow their instructions myself. If you scroll down a little further, here's some instructions on how to do the actual hot end fix. You can find those in my video as well. They're all Luke Hatfield's instructions. I just filmed them so I could make it a little easier for people like me who like to see it visually. And then if you keep scrolling down, sometimes they'll tell you how they designed it and a lot of other information. Something else you might want to look at is comments. So you click the comments button, and if you scroll down, you'll see people saying, hey, I made this, it's great. Does it? They'll ask questions if it works with certain printers or all different questions. And I like to go through this because sometimes people will say this file doesn't work. And if the file doesn't work, it's not worth your time downloading. Go to the next one or find something different. And a lot of times people will comment that right in there. So if you go back, there we go, to the front here. Once you're settled on your file, what you want to do is go up here to download all files. This is what I prefer to do. Click on download all files and it'll pop up this page here, which I usually ignore, but in the bottom left, on Chrome at least, in the bottom left, it'll show you this right here. And this is going to go into my download folder. So I like to go show in folder, and then for myself, I like to cut that, and I'm going to put it in a different folder so it's a little bit easier to see. So I'm going to actually open the movie I'm working on right now, and I'm going to give it a new name, and we're going to call it STL files. So I'm going to go in that STL file, and I'm just going to paste Control V as in Victor. We'll paste it in there. Okay, so now once you have it, it's going to show up in a zip file. I choose to just extract all. So if you go here and you do extract, it'll actually extract it and then pop up the window for you when it's done. But what I was trying to say is it'll extract it in the same folder you're in. If you want to keep them, great. Some people like to keep them and then delete the zip file so you don't have two files of the same thing. That's okay too. Whatever works best for you. But then what you want to do is go ahead and open. And a lot of times you can, there's different cards in here, some license info, there's images that you can actually walk through and see what the parts are going to look like, what they look like printed if the author posted them, how to put them together sometimes is in here. There's a lot of information in these pictures. So if I go back one and we go into files, this is all the files, that .stl files that we were talking about. This is the files that we're actually going to take. We're going to put them in a slicer and let the slicer give us our G-code so we can actually print. So I have an Ender 3, so I would go here, and that's what I would do. So that's how you get your STL files. And in this example, we got the Creality hot end PTFE fix, and that's how you get them. Okay, now what do we do with the STL file? Well, we need to use a slicer to modify the STL file to go to G-code for the printer to be able to print to it. Okay, what is Gcode? That's another strange named file. Well, Gcode is a series of instruction that instructs the printer what to do. There are M codes or modal commands and G codes or linear travel instructions. But thankfully, for the most part, the slicing software takes care of that part for us, so we don't have to worry about that. Oh boy, another new thing. A slicer. What the heck is that? Well, it's actually software, but it gets its nickname from slicing the parts into layers so that the printer knows what to do in each layer to build the new model you want to build. And that brings us into section 1.7, slicing software. So what is slicing software? Well, in Luke's help guide, this is what it says. But in short, it is a tool to translate the STL files into G-code files that we can print with. And that's what we're going to show you now. To get started, we need to find out what slicing software is out there. And there's a bunch of them. We have Simplified 3D, which is a paid product, and it's often preferred by advanced users. We have Cura, which is a free product of Ultimaker brand printers, but can be used for almost anything. We have Slicer, which is an open-based project. Repetier, a slicer that can be used with Cura in certain packages, and many, many more. So let's get started. I like to use Cura myself, but to get started, let's skip the shipped version of software that's set with the printer because it's likely several versions or updates out of date. So we're going to head straight to the Cura homepage. You can find that in the description below or the slicer of your choice's homepage. And let's find the latest full version release that is not a beta testing version. Just so you know, my video today will be from Cura 3.6.0. Okay, so I went to the link in the description below, and I'll put it down there for the Cura homepage. When it opens up, you'll see something like this. I just hit I agree, and there we go. So the latest version that is not a beta is Cura 3.6. So we're going to go ahead and click download. And in this case, Cura wants to know what you're going to use it for. So you can go ahead and answer any of these. I've already done this, so I'm just going to say I don't want to share my information, and then hit download. So again, the download in Chrome will come up in the bottom left, and there you go, it's done. So we're just going to go ahead and click on it, and that should bring us up and start setting us up. Okay, so now we're into the Cura setup here. So when this window comes up, go ahead and click next. Go ahead and click I agree. I would suggest reading through that. Click next, and I always just click install. So it'll go ahead and install now, and once it's completely done, we'll go from there. Okay, when it's done, you want to go ahead and click next, and it'll go ahead and open up to a window just like this. Say, I understand and I agree. The first thing you're going to want to do is choose your printer. So you can go through the list here. There's a whole bunch of printers in here. In my case, I have a Creality Ender 3, so I'm going to choose Creality Ender 3. You can give your printer a name, like Creality Ender 3, test or workroom or whatever you want to call it. If you have multiple, I just usually leave mine, and we'll hit Add Printer. If this collecting data comes up, you can allow it if you want to. I usually just close it. And then I'm going to maximize here. So the next thing we can do is just check the settings of the printer out. So we can go to Settings, we can go to Printer, and then Manage Printers. So this is the one we just added, which is Creality Ender 3. We can go to Machine Settings. So in these settings, you can actually see the size of the bed that the slicer shows. And if you don't have one of the printers that's listed, this is where you would change it. So if yours is 250, by 250 by 300, you could change it just like that. We know the Ender 3 is 235 by 235 by 250, and it'll actually adjust the size of the bed in the back here. Some other things you want to check out: your extruder. You want to make sure its nozzle size is whatever you have. So in my case, the stock Ender 3 has a 0.4 millimeter nozzle size. If I change that to one of my smaller or larger ones, I need to remember to come in here and change this number. Also, the material you're using, for instance, on the Ender 3 is 1.75 millimeter filament, and you want to make sure that's set correctly as well. So if you get a batch of filament and you measure it and it's 1.70, you can always change it in here if you want to, but that's another topic for another day. So the other thing we have in here is your Gcode starting and ending. What that means is that anything under the Start Gcode here, so all of this is going to happen before your print starts. All of this is going to happen after your print ends. So in my opinion, I would check out Luke's help guide, and he has some really good starting Gcode, and maybe we'll make a video on how to modify that later. So go ahead and close this. You can close that, and what we have here is the picture of our Ender 3 bed. It's 235 by 235 by 250, and that's what we like to see. Okay, so now that we got our slicer set up, in my case Cura, I'm just going to show you a couple quick things in here to get you started on your first print. So in the top right over here, you can choose what kind of material you're going to be using. In this case, I use PLA. We're going to leave it on PLA. Based on that, it's going to give you some recommended settings. So if you open here, you can actually see the recommended settings. In this case, it's set on draft, which is 0.2 millimeters, and we're going to leave it there for now. The next thing we want to do is go ahead and get our STL file, the model we got earlier, into the slicer and slice it to get our Gcode file like we talked about earlier. So we're going to go to Open File. I'm going to go to where we stored our file from, and I'm going to look. Remember I said I had an Ender 3, so I'm going to go ahead and select Ender 3 and hit Open. So what this is going to do, it's going to show us our model, what we want printed, in the middle of the bed. Now with the right click button, you can move this around and see it at different angles. You can also grab it and move it around on different parts of the bed if you want to do, multiple of them or anything like that. But for now, just a basic how to get us started. This is our model. Assuming that we're going to go through all of the same standard recommended settings here, what we do is, once we get this ready to go, we go to the bottom right, we click Prepare, and it'll slice. So now it says in the bottom right here, 12 minutes. Then what we would do is go ahead and save to file, and myself, I like to go back to the file where I stored those STLs, and right here, it's going to say this is the Ender 3 cut, the name of it, .gcode. That Gcode is the file that we actually need to print with. So once we hit save, our Gcode is saved. The only thing we have to do now is go ahead and take that Gcode file, put it on an SD card, put it in our printer, and go ahead and print it. Okay, let's go through a couple things on the right side of Cura. The first thing is the layer height. This is the amount the printer will lay down in a given layer on the print. So you can adjust your layer height here. The next thing is the shell. The shell pertains to the thickness of the outer layer of the part. You can actually define that with a line count or with the wall thickness. The next thing we have is the infill. The infill's the way you can support the inside of the part without making it a solid piece of plastic. This can be anywhere from 1 to 100%. 20% to 40% is common, depending on what you're printing. The next thing is material. This section has 4 very important features defined: the nozzle temp or the printing temperature, the bed temperature or the build plate temperature, and flow. I don't see flow on here, so we're going to go ahead and add it. To add something is what you'll want to do is you click this gear here, and it'll bring up everything here. So we want to see the flow. There we go. And retraction. So the 4 big things in material are your printing temperature, your build plate temperature, your flow, so we can get the flow rate defined. In another video of mine, we went through E-steps and flow rate. And then retraction. The next thing in our list is speed. This controls the printing speeds for different areas of the print. It has sub-options for the first layer, the outer wall, the inner wall, and infill speeds. And you can find all of those options by going to the gear here. Next thing is travel. Travel has a few options to avoid crossing certain areas while repositioning the nozzle during your printing. So you can choose Z-hop if you want. I usually don't use it myself, but some people do and they like it a lot. The next thing is cooling. It's setting when you do or do not want the part cooling fan to run and what percentage of the capacity to run if needed. So for instance, do we want it on? Yes, at 100% for sure. I like to click the gear here, and I like to do initial fan speed, and you know what, for me, I like to click all these because I like to control my fan a lot. There we go. So what that'll give you is what your fan speed is going to be. The initial fan speed, for instance, I like to set it to 0 for my first 2 layers right here. So it kicks in at layer 2, I'm sorry. So 0 for the bottom and the first layer, and it kicks in at layer 2 up to 100%, and that's what we like. The next thing is support. Support, this prints waste material that will not bond to the primary model. When there are areas that are printing above the initial height and need to be supported till the section bonds with a kept part. In other words, what that does is it prints supports. For instance, you have a big overhang and the printer usually doesn't print in thin air, so it'll print supports up to hold that part underneath, and then you'll end up taking those off later and throwing them away. Build plate adhesion. There's a few categories here. Skirt is the priming function. So if your model that does not need any extra adhesion, then you would use a skirt. You can also choose brim or raft. A brim adds a small layer around the print to help it stick down better. A raft will lay down a layer of filament first and then build the print on top. So today we went through sections 1.6 and 1.7 of Luke Hatfield's help guide. We found STL files, we put them in a slicer, we got our Gcode file, and now we're ready to print. I hope you guys learned something today. I hope you all have a great day and keep printing. Please like the video, click subscribe if you want to see more, and click on the little bell if you want to be notified when the next great videos come out.